Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I am going to be doing a little series this month of Embrace the Magical. I'm going to be doing a series of short videos. We'll see. I know you all don't believe I can do anything short, but my intention is to be sort of a snapshot, right? So it's going to be divination snapshot of all the different divination things that I have used, have access to, that kind of thing. So there'll be one on tarot, and one on Lenormand, and one on oracles, and one on pendulums, and scrying, and just anything and everything that I've probably got full videos of on my channel. Some maybe not like this one that I'm starting out with, because somebody had left a comment on one of my past Instagram pictures of this challenge about reading with dominoes. So that's why I'm starting with this snapshot of divination of dominoes. So I'm not going to go super in depth, and my intention is just to give a little bit of a history about the particular divination that I'm going to be using, as well as a basically how it all functions and works, and then sort of why this divination over particular any other divinations. Like, why would I use that particular form of divination over tarot or something of that nature? What does it have to bring that's different, right, that makes it interesting? Because generally something interests me for a reason. Why does this particular thing catch my interest, and why would I use this over a different one? So this is welcome to the first of that little series called Snapchat Divination. So as you can see, we're going to be talking about dominoes. Now, I had put, I believe, the third keyword for hashtag Embrace the Magical for 2017 was divination. So I just grabbed a couple things that I had handy, like tarot deck and Lenormand card and cards, different things like that. That were just, I didn't grab everything that I have that I use for divination, but I grabbed a few things and stuck it out there in the middle and took a picture of it. And so one of the questions was, have I ever used dominoes for divination? And so the answer is yes. I don't know why I have never talked about it. It's not something I use a lot. And again, I had played around with it a little bit a long time ago, and it was before I was really doing a ton of work. I was reading tarot cards, but mostly for myself and friends and a couple family members. It was well before I was intensely studying, and or certainly before I started reading professionally. And so it's just, I don't know why, it's just never come reminded. And so it was a reminder of that. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to start with that so I can answer the question and also get started on Snapchat divination. Now, I will say that I tend to read a little bit differently than other people that I can find. There's not a ton of information that I can find on traditional divining with dominoes. Dominoes are nothing that are new, right? These have been around, I believe they originated in China, actually, minus the blanks. I believe the European use of dominoes added in the blanks, but in Chinese dominoes, the blanks were not there. But the earliest recorded information that we have about dominoes in China were in, I believe, the early 1200s, or in that 1200 range. And the best understanding of what might have brought it over to Europe would have been missionaries that had gone to China, bringing it back over to Europe from there, and then eventually the blanks being added into the European version. But it seems as if historically they would have made their way into Europe in the 18th century, first showing up in Italy. So that is what we have basically on sort of the historic look at dominoes. Now, in terms of divination, there's not as much about the history or about divination with dominoes. There was definitely indication that they were used for divinatory rays as well in China, but I don't have a lot of details on that. And then we do have a concept of the Romani people using dominoes. Again, there's a lot of myth, right? So there's a lot of myth and misinformation surrounding what the Romani people, aka what people traditionally would call gypsies, and sometimes even, refer to themselves. I know Raymond Buckland does a lot of gypsy this and gypsy that, even though he is from gypsy heritage, but some confusion about that's not really the best term to use. I think Romani is supposed to be the best term. Well, even in terms of what they use for divination, what they didn't use for divination, becomes a little bit questionable and problematic, because the myth of the gypsy, right? So that story aspect and that mythology that grows around the idea of the gypsy can be very different from what the experience and the life and the truth around the Romani people might be, right? So it becomes questionable. But there are just some different sites that show, this is the way that the gypsies used to tell it, right? And Raymond Buckland did do a book, actually. I think there's actually a deck called the Gypsy Domino Deck, something like that, where he had domino pips on the cards, as well as some keywords. He also has a book on domino gypsy, and again, that's his terminology, gypsy domino divination. So there was certainly that was in the I think the 90s. But you can find, there are websites. I pulled out a couple of them. There are websites that will have sort of meanings of the tiles. But as you can imagine, every single one is something different. They don't match up. Some of them match up, like the double sixes are always really something good, and the double zeros are always the worst. So you definitely have that lowest number to highest number in almost all of the information that I found. The other one, this was a book from the 70s called A Guide to Soothsayer's Handbook, A Guide to Bad Signs and Good Vibrations by Eleanor Lander. This is in the 70s, that listed out some of the meanings there, and used it sort of as a monthly and yearly. You picked 2 tiles. But again, generally, every single one of the sets of meanings for the tiles are different. You can see a cartomancy, because what we have here are pips. Right? These are pips, just like card pips, just like playing card pips, just like any kind of pips. And anytime you have a fairly common system, such as playing cards, that would be used in many different places and have many different variations. Dominoes were used in many different places, many different countries, many different cultures, and every single one, even differing counties probably in a certain area, might have different meanings to what this is the way it is supposed to be, right? And so you can find as many different times as you can find somebody giving the meanings of the dominoes, you can find different meanings for the pips. So that is the case in anything that has been around for very long. You're going to see a variety, and that doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. It just means there's different ways for looking at this particular form of divination, just as you will find in other systems as well. So what I always say with any system is figure out what it means to you. Figure out the system. Do your due research, because it helps to see what are other people doing, what are other people saying about it, what is the history behind it. Figure out what resonates with you for a meaning for each one, and then stick with it. Because with any system, my personal opinion is, and my experience with using a multitude of different divination systems is, that the key is consistency. Whether I say this means go get a different job, and this means you have the perfect job, stay where you are. If I decide that's what these mean, and every single time I use it, that's what they mean, I'm going to get a more consistent reading than if I'm going to say one time this means this, and another time, well, it might mean this, and this time means this. Now, yes, you're going to have variations based on what? Based on the question, of course. But in the end, it should have some sort of base meaning. And once it does, you should apply that that consistently, and that's going to help you keep you from getting muddy readings. And so I think that whatever source you end up, if you decide I'm going with Raymond Buckland's book, that's the meanings I'm going to use, great. Apply those consistently, and you're probably going to end up with consistent readings. If you're going to decide, okay, well, this one right here from Serena's Guide to Divination website, okay, this makes sense to me. It has a balance here. I'm going to go with that. Okay, pick that and go with it, right? And run with it and stay with it. But if you try to pull all different answers from all different places or kind of layer it starts to get really muddied. So anyways, that's my personal advice when you're dealing with systems in which there are many variations of meanings, is to figure out what resonates with you and then apply that consistently. Now, I, of course, if anybody who follows this channel knows, I love pips, and I love especially the way that they are associated with numbers. Now, of course, this is a system in which it applies all numbers, right? Or it's all numbers. There's no images here. There's no suits here. It's just numbers. Now, there is a way to apply general suits. I saw this in a couple places. This is not how I learned, because again, when I was messing around with them, I was just using numerology, and that's pretty much what I do with them. But you can find sources. This is Advanced Gypsy Domino Fortune Telling from dominoplay.com, and there are suits where in all of the zeros, somewhat, when they're blanks, they have some degree of connection to the querent, right? The ones are all about the journey. Twos are about loved ones, close friends. Three is all about romance. Four is all about wealth. Five is all about career. Six is about fortune and good luck. So then there's going to be variations, but those are kind of suits, so to speak, right? And that I saw in more than one place. There was another one that seemed to be pretty close. Yeah, this is actually the exact same as this in terms of the general of the sixes and the fives and the fours. So you can go about it that way as well. Again, you have to simply do your due diligence, see what works for you, and then apply that. But in general, you really are looking at a system of numbers. So, of course, now, I learned to play dominoes a long time ago. Let's see, I would have been 26 or so, and I am now 49. So I learned to play dominoes. I was working with somebody that was Hispanic, and his grandfather and all of his friends and things were really, I don't know a lot about Hispanic culture, so I don't know how popular domino playing is amongst that culture. He spoke no English, but I would go over and learn to play dominoes with him and his grandfather, and sometimes a couple of his friends, and again, so fast, like they played so quickly. It's obviously something they've been doing their whole lives, and they played really fast, but they were so sweet and taught me how to play dominoes. So that would have been with a 20, I think. It's been so long, but I feel like that was just probably with a standard 28. It was, of course, originally a 21 in the Chinese versions because they didn't use blanks. And then it was a 28. It became a 28 tile set as a standard set. But I also love to play Mexican Train. And I don't know when the history of that and how long that's been around, but you can get sets for Mexican Train. A really fun way to play dominoes, especially with a couple friends. It's a lot of fun. I cannot tell you how many games of Mexican Train I have played. And in Mexican Train, you actually get a full, I think it's a 12, double 12s. So you can get up to, this is a standard set is a double 6. So of course it goes to the highest, you have 0 to the highest being a double 6. And this is a traditional set of dominoes. I like to use for reading a set of double 9s. So that means that the highest is a double 9 because I love brain. I love the numbers, and of course having that full range of numbers is really helpful. So for the longest time, whenever I did play around with it, I used a double set of 9s. Now, because, you know, I have grown and changed since then, and I have really set numbering system from 1 through 10, I went ahead and added in the 10s. So these are the 10s. So this goes up to a double 10, from 0 to 10. Now, I don't use the zeros or the blanks as being, the double 0 I do use as a significator. But other than that, I don't use this as meaning something. For me, it just means that that number that's there is the key number. There's not a shifting going on. This is really key. Is it on the bottom? Is it on the top? What's going on there that way? Whereas you have movement, right? From bottom to top. You have that growth. You can do above and below of this particular set, or however you're going to do that. But it just adds emphasis to that single card. And so, or pip. And so I don't read this 0 as being anything other than the double 0 as being a significator. So, you know, that was sort of the final iteration of dominoes for me, is to take it to the 10. I think in order to do that, if that's something that is interest of you, you would have to get a set of Mexican train tiles, which again goes to double 12s, and then remove the set of the extra ones. So you're going to remove the 11s and the 12s. That way you can have the 0 through 10. And you could take the zeros out and just do the 1s through 10. But I quite like actually having that 0 because sometimes, again, it just places really emphasis on that particular number. Now, generally, there's a couple ways in which people seem to pull for divinatory things. The two basic ways, generally, we will see readings about anything about this I've ever found is using 3 tiles. That tends to be the typical thing. I have seen some books that have like a version of the Celtic Cross in it. I think there's a website with a version of the Celtic Cross. Any websites I can find, I'll try to remember to link below, but I'm not always good about remembering that by the time it gets put up, because I film these and then I import, I export, I upload them, and then by the time it's just there, sometimes I do forget, as someone, not meanly, but did point out, as I always say it, I don't do it, and it's true, but just leave a comment, and I do try to go back if I leave a comment and somebody tells me. But I have seen other spreads as well, but I just use three because you actually have 6 cards, right? In effect, you have 6 numbers that are going to show up, even if it's a 0 on one of them, right? You've got 6 things, so it's really beautiful, and I personally don't ever use any more than 3. Again, this is not something I've used for a very long time. I'm so glad that the commenter on my Instagram reminded me of this. Because, yeah, I don't know, I just have never, I believe somebody about a year ago or so, I remember somebody putting up something about dominoes. I'll see if I can find it. I think it might have been Amber, but I could be wrong. I'll take it, and she had specific meanings, I think, for each of the ones, which this is not. I don't read that way. So again, you would have to find resources. Again, just like traditional cartomancy, there's all kinds of variations out there. There is a couple books, primarily the Buckland one. There's a couple in other languages as well. But I've never read that way, and so this is not a how to read traditional in a traditional manner. Again, I'll put at least links to these, which do give you some specific meanings, and I'll show them to you. You know, I'll pick a couple out and show you what those are, based more what I do, which is just what I do with pips, right? It's just, what does that number mean? So let's just use a question here. If we have, you know, somebody who is just really feeling stuck, which is a big question that comes up a lot. I'm feeling stuck. I need to get unstuck. What's going on? Now, there are a couple ways people pull. I just mix, and then pull 3. Now, some people mix, pull 1. Right? Note it down, put it back in, mix again, pull 1, put it back in, mix, and do that so that you could actually get, say, the 10 and the 1 twice in a reading. I don't do that. I simply mix, and then pull 3 free tiles. Because really, it's very random. Once you've got them here, you've got them mixed in, you can kind of, you know, get your zing and pull. And you do want to pay attention, either always, you know, flip up and lay like that, or pick up and lay where it is, how it's at. However you're going to do that, because you do, you know, how it is placed top to bottom, that's important. That's going to say something. So you, again, you just want consistency. If you always just grab and lay and just don't pay a lot of attention and see whatever that turns out, then just do it, always do it that way. Because you really can't just go like this, because some will be like this, depending on how you draw. Now, you can also put these all into a big bag and grab them out, which I certainly do sometimes when if I wouldn't want to get everything out. It doesn't matter. Get your hand in there and dig around and pull, right? It's about synchronicity. So in the end, whatever works for you works, and there's not some magic way to just do it just this way, and that's the only way you're going to get a message. It just depends on what you do. So you can just kind of get them nicely mixed like this, and then pull 3 questions, right? And so then we have those 3 tiles that we can look at. What we actually have, though, is 6 numbers. And I really love this for, again, you have sort of above and below what's going on, or what's going on underneath the situation. This is primarily what we might read, and then what's going on underneath. That's a really good way to look at it as well. So if the question here is about feeling stuck and needing to get unstuck. Well, let's just, for example, take one. I'm just grab this one. Doesn't mean this is the right one. This is from dominoplay.com. And see, we can use these numbers. So, for example, here we have, well, see, these don't really work. Sorry, people. Because I don't read this way, it doesn't really do me any good, right? This is only going to go through 6. So if you want to take meanings that are used, you're just going to want to use a basic domino set. Really cheap to get. You can purchase a pack for like $6 in the store. So if it's something you're interested in, do that. A set of Mexican train tiles probably going to cost you $10 to $15. And then you can pull out however number you want. But this really isn't going to work for me to show you an example, because I use more than 6 tiles. So there we go. So here we have the number 7, right? So the number 7 for me is about growth. It's about from stability comes growth, right? What's interesting is that what's going on underneath it is the number 1. So this does indicate new beginning. Something actually new is going to come out of the situation. So right now, this person's feeling stuck, right? That's the idea of feeling stuck and feeling, the number 4 is that kind of stuck feeling, or stable, which can also feel stagnant, but something new is going to come up. And this could also indicate that, you know what, you're going to have to start something new to get this growing process in order. If you want to get unstuck, you've got to be open to growth and to trying new things, right? When we look here, we have the number 9. So the number 9 is about a lot of energy going on, bouncing around all over the place here, right? But underneath it is a number 6, which for me is a number of harmony. So that can indicate that we need to bring things into balance. We need to harmonize all of this energy that's going on, because it doesn't have any focus, which is part of the reason maybe feeling stuck, is that idea that you may have a bazillion ideas, but A, you're not really doing anything to get that growth started and kind of start something fresh and new. And B, there's a lot of potential energy that needs to be used, but you're going to have to bring it into a balance and harmony before it's going to actually happen, right? And I love this last tile where we have this new beginning that we saw here. Here we see that new beginning in the upper, where it's actually going to start to occur, and what is underneath it is the 0. Now again, I could read this, and that's what came to mind, even though I just said, I don't really do that typically, but this could indicate that this person, right, is really vital in this, that they've got to get behind, they've got to get under this new growth and this new change. But we can also just read this as it's new growth is coming. If you can harmonize things, if you can be willing to go in a new direction and willing to start to grow, but first you got to bring all this energy into balance here, and the new growth is definitely coming. It's like an exclamation point underneath it. Bam, there you have it. Now, you can also do a lot of times you'll see in readings that you'll use sort of past. So that's just you doing a 3 card, just like you would with tarot. You know, it's really not any different. But what's beautiful about this system is that you do have these 2 rows here that are playing off each other. Can you get that with a 6 card Lenormand or a 6 card tarot? Yeah, you can. But there's something really cool and really interesting about the dynamic of how are you going to read that? Is this, you know, what's going on under the surface, and this is this actual situation? Is this what's above and what's below? Is this showing movement of this number to this number? What could that mean to you, depending on what that is? You know, depending on the question is how you might approach each time you do this type of thing, right? So if we have a different question, I don't generally, I wouldn't, for me, this system would not have any much benefit in reading yes and no questions, unless you do have, you know, if you're just using a basic set, obviously, and you have very specific things, you know, 2 negative things to what positive might certainly tell you something, right? So if you have certain ways to look at things, then that might be very helpful, and you could do it that way. I personally don't. Very few things I use for yes and no. Generally, it's playing card. Playing cards to me are the easiest way to draw 3 playing cards. Is how I would generally always do a yes and no, or geomancy. Those are my yes and no's. I don't really use this way. So if we had a question about a relationship, having trouble in a relationship, you know, not really sure what's going on, not really sure, you know, what do you need to know currently about this particular relationship, and you pulled 3 cards, or again 3. These are often called tiles. They're sometimes called bones. Definitely they were called bones, I think, when I was learning how to play, because you pull from the bone field. So this would be the bone field here, and you're pulling bones. That's how I learned to play dominoes. So that's also a way that you can refer to them. But let's say you had that. The other thing that I didn't talk about before is adding the numbers together at the end, which I'm going to do that. I'm trying to keep this short. Again, this isn't supposed to be a be-all, end-all on how to read. It's really fairly simple. The way that I personally would use these are really quite simple. So here we have, let's say we're talking about the relationship and we're looking at past, present, and future. We have the number 7 here doubled up. So what's going on here is, again, that need for new growth. Things maybe were needing to grow in the past, but we've got that doubled here. So what's going on under the surface is also a need to grow. If you add these together, you have 7 and 7 is 14. You always condense down with numerology to the smallest single digit. So 7 and 7 is 14. 1 plus 4 is 5. So that is a disruptive number. There could be some things that were disruptive in the past, a need for growth, maybe feeling stagnancy, and it was causing some difficulties and some angst. Right now we have the issue again still as 5. So that sense of disruption. The 5 is a shakeup. The number 5 is disruptive. It's not always negative, but it can be. And underneath it's kind of bolstered by the 6, which is a number for need to harmonize things, right? That's just not working correctly. If you add these together, they equal 11. 1 plus 1 is 2, which is both a duality and it can be polarity. So that is a need to maybe come together. They are in some way between these two. There's not really a coming together. If they could just kind of rebalance and harmonize things, excuse me, things might work out better. And that's really bolstered here by this, right? Where we do have that sense of unity, right? And new beginnings doubled up. And if you do, again, 1 plus 1 is 2, and that needing to come together. But as the future card, this does indicate that there is a way forward to that. If they can reharmonize them somehow, instead of having a polarity that's pushing away, or the number 5, which is kind of dispersing and shaking things up, if they could bring that together as pulling things together, then we would have that sort of movement towards things working together. So that's, you can see that it really leads to, you've got both what's going on at the surface and what's going on underneath. And when you combine that and reduce the number, we've also got almost a third option for that. Now, technically, you could also add all of these together and reduce that number down for a final number, but that includes doing some math. So if we have 7 and 7 is 14, and we have 11 here, so that would be 25. And then you have 2 more, 26, 27. 7 plus 2 is 9, which is dynamic energy and growth. It's lots of energy going around, but it is still a little chaotic. So it does still have that idea. There is a lot of potential energy, but we look to that middle 6 here, and that would tell me, and I probably added those. Somebody's going to say you added those wrong. I don't generally do that, or I haven't done that in the past. Now I could see where that would be something you could actually do to get an overall number. I would probably double check my math because I'm horrible at doing math in my head. But that's still that sense that things need to be balanced, harmonized, and brought together with the relationship. So you actually get quite a lot out of 3 little tiles. I've never done anything more than 3 tiles. Again, I have seen books or spreads that were either the Celtic cross or some other variation with more tiles, but I have only ever used 3, and so that's the only experience that I have. So again, what I just showed you is not traditional domino divination. I've never done traditional domino divination. I just use the numerology. The other thing is I will say that I quite like tiles like this that have the different colors. You could actually bring colors into it if you wanted to, but I just like it because it really stands out. The numbers, different numberings stand out really well rather than all the same color, but that's just personal preference. These are really cheap and easy to find. Of course, you can get beautiful sets as well, although those are generally going to be that standard set of 28 tiles, which is a double 6. Again, in order to do what I'm doing here, you would need to probably get a Mexican train set, which is double 12s. I've not seen a double 10 set being you can just purchase a double 10. So that would be the only way I think that you could do what I do. So anyways, I hope this was interesting. I hope this is not as long as I think it is because I'm trying to keep these shorter. But I really find that if you really love numbers and you just want to focus on numbers, if you really like the way, and again, this to me is fantastic. I'm so thankful to the person who brought it up in a comment on Instagram, because I haven't had these out in forever, and I've certainly learned a lot more about numbers and how I read numbers since I used to play around with these. It's not anything I ever did for very often. It was just something that was kind of fun. And when I was playing a lot of Mexican trains, so the dominoes were out, so I would play around with it as well. And I can definitely see myself using this more because I do love numbers. I do love pips. I do love the idea of just having a pure numerological set. And I really like the way that because you have the top and the bottom, you can have heaven and earth here, much like you would have kind of the top and the bottom of an I Ching hexagram. There's just a lot you can do with the way that these are set up. You could, some people read them this way. I've definitely seen tiles read this way, where you have that movement from past to future, kind of a movement here. Are we going from here to here, here to here? You could definitely do that as well. Again, I've just always did it this way. But again, make it your own. Do what you want to do with it, and just do whatever you do consistently. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little snapshot, and I will be seeing you again for more.